is at the root of what separates us and leads to cycles of polarization, violence, traumatization, and death. I have been feeling into the collective of humanity and the earth in these times, feeling the climactic crisis in Israel and Palestine, and inquiring into what is at the root and what is needed. How can we bring love into the eye of the storm? And at this moment, there is a new moon eclipse in Libra. I find myself considering the aspect of balance, harmony, mutuality. Sending a prayer of love and peace and harmony to all the people in the Middle East, the Israelis, the Palestinians, and all of us, for we are one being. We are interconnected. So, from this perspective of being one, I'm curious to look at what is it that Palestine and Israel is expressing. What part of our being is coming to such an intense climax of crisis? And this is quite a sensitive topic, and as I was preparing to share with you today, I was feeling so many different layers of what is being stirred in humanity right now around this situation. Whew. There's such an intensity, and in that intensity, I perceive a great potential for transformation. And so many of us are trying to make sense of what is happening. And with so many different layers of a historical conflict and a variety of different investments into what is happening, it can be a lot to digest and metabolize and make sense of. What I keep coming back to is this inquiry or prayer of how can I be an instrument of love? How can I, within myself, bring compassion to this expression of terror, of anguish, of grief, of heartbreak, of confusion, of despair. How can I meet this with compassion, humility, and deep soul listening? My sense is that it's beyond the rational mind to make sense of. And the sense making is partly bringing our awareness to these different felt aspects of the whole picture. So coming back to one of my first questions of what is at the root of what separates us, or what creates the distortion in our lens of perception that leads to us thinking that we are separate and that somebody else out there has to pay. Yeah, I've been looking into terror and what is it that moves one to terrorize. And many times it comes from an experience of terror and a pain that is sometimes so overwhelming and intense that there is an impulse to somehow seek a way to find relief from that pain, an attempt to find a sense of power. And so many times this leads to cycles and cycles and cycles through generations of traumatization, where one experience of terror, of violence, of being violated, of loss, of torture, of being a recipient of sadistic hatred and violence. Impacts one in so many ways that if not processed and brought love, compassion, healing, reintegration into the totality of awareness, are then influencing one's perception, one's action, one's reaction. And the feeling of being powerless too can be flipped into an attempt to find power by powering over another. And this is a tragically painful, continuous cycle. An attempt to meet needs for empowerment, for love, for freedom. So if we can bring in ourselves love and compassion to those places, where we may have experienced terror or some flavor of fear, where we may have experienced loss, heartbreak, anger about experiencing being violated or the recipient of violence. If we can bring compassion to those places within us, we then grow our capacity to meet that in the collective. And we can meet one another with that love, with that understanding, with that empathy. Dropping beneath all the storylines that perpetuate a self-righteous blame, shame, justification for continued cycles of violence. Of course, this sorrow is not only valid, but calling for love, tenderness, sweet care, kindness. And I don't propose to know what those who are experiencing the war there are going through. What I can do is open my heart to feel and meet whatever arises. To not shy away, to not avoid, to not deny, to not numb out, but to meet straight on, to look into the eye of the storm with my heart open and loving and listening. As we try to make sense, we may not find answers with the mind. We can come back to the center of our being, the seat of our soul, the gateway to emanating the divine love into our humanity, our collective being. One of the most challenging things to actually include and meet with love and make sense of is acts of cruelty. Acts of terrorizing. And it seems to me that the events currently are a call for us to bring our hearts into contact with what is happening. How can we come together? How can we reintegrate the parts that have been disenfranchised, that have been oppressed, that have been terrorized, that are wounded, that are hurting? How do we do that in ourselves, and how do we do that as a collective? In me, there is an inspiration that we hold this inquiry together, that we hold the inquiry. How can we come into harmony? What is needed for healing? How can we participate in that healing? How can we be instruments of love? How can we meet it all with compassion? For we are one being. We are one. And we are in a time of great transformation. It's not always comfortable. May we rise together as one to meet this crisis and all crisis as a healing crisis, as an opportunity to reintegrate those parts of ourself that need love the most. Once again, a prayer out to the people in Palestine and Israel and the whole web of life interconnected. the breath, bringing an emanation of our soul, divinity, our love into creation.